American Motors Corporation, the fourth American automaker. At one time there was more than just a few American auto manufacturers, but by the 70s it was down to the big three and AMC. Unfortunately, being fourth means you're not on the podium. Now, AMC purchased Jeep for $70 million in 1970, and it was seen as quite the gamble at the time, but it was a good thing they did, since by the late 70s, Jeeps were about the only AMC products selling. Shocking with a line of passenger cars like this, I know. The truth was though, AMC didn't really have the money to replace their aging passenger car line, and so even their quote-unquote new models for 1978 weren't really all that new. If AMC was going to build an all-new high-tech passenger car, they were going to need some help, especially with more and more passenger cars switching to front drive, a new platform for AMC which they had no money to develop. In spring of 1978, AMC partnered with French automaker Renault. AMC would become the sole importer and distributor for Renault models in America, while Renault would sell AMC Jeeps in Europe throughout their dealership network. In addition, the two companies would build a new economy car in America for the American market. This car, built in Kenosha, Wisconsin, AMC's once outdated plant now modernized with French robots, was an Americanized version of the Renault 9 called the Renault Alliance. And that's the car we're going to talk about today. The Renault Alliance went into production in 1982, and in June it was launched as an 83 model. In an effort to, I guess, build hype around the new model, AMC released the first photos of it, scrambled. Well, I guess that's still not as bad as Nissan releasing the first commercials of their new Infiniti flagship without any footage of it at all. So anyway, I guess if you wanted to cut the squares out, you could rearrange them yourself and see what the new model was going to look like. Luckily, if you don't like puzzles, Motor Week did it for you.
Behold, the 1983 Renault Alliance by AMC.
Styling is very 80s with quad rectangle headlights and taillights that are almost Datsun 210-like. And even the base model has bumpers that are mostly body colored. The rear wheel arch also sits low, not a design feature you are commonly seen anymore by the 80s, maybe on a Cadillac, but certainly not in an economy car. The rear wheel arch is actually quite different between the sedan and coupe models. Notice how on the sedan, the rear wheel arch is pretty low, below the body side molding, and covers most of the rubber. But on the coupe you can see it goes up much higher, actually breaks the body molding line. You almost don't really even notice that it's a lower than normal wheel arch until you compare it to the front one. The Renault logo sits proudly on the grille and steering wheel, with the only AMC badging on the trunk lid. Of course, by 1982, Renault owned a controlling interest in AMC after years of poor passenger car sales compounded by the 1979 oil crisis left AMC on the verge of bankruptcy, and they were not given the luxury of a government loan guarantee like Chrysler was. So in 1980, Renault purchased 1.5 million AMC shares, gaining a controlling interest and saving the company from insolvency. Had they not done this, we never would have got the Renault Alliance. Oh, big deal. Well, maybe you don't care about that, but how about this? Had AMC gone under in 1980, the XJ Cherokee never would have been finished. Now that would have been a tragedy. Inside you'll find kind of an odd looking steering wheel. This is actually the optional leather wrapped sport steering wheel. The standard steering wheel was this one, or this one on DL and above models, which is also leather wrapped on limited trims. I'll get to the trims in a minute. Then we have this gauge cluster with a tach, speedo, coolant, and fuel gauge, and a rather unusual oil gauge which actually measures oil level, not oil pressure. If my understanding of it is correct, when you turn the ignition on, it lets you know if your oil level is in the okay range. No need to get your fingers dirty reading a dipstick like some kind of American peasant. I assume this gauge isn't accurate when the car is running. I don't know what it shows or does at that point, but if that's the case, it's a very oddly placed front and center gauge for something that isn't actually useful when you're actually driving. The tach was standard on all models except the base and L trim, but could be added as an option to the L. Speaking of trims and models, the Alliance initially came in 2- and 4-door body styles and 4 different trim levels: base, L, DL, and limited. 2 doors came in base, L, and DL, while 4 doors came in L, DL, and limited. All models except those sold in California are powered by a single-point injected 1.4-liter engine rated at 64 horsepower, with a 0 to 60 time of 14.3 seconds, which makes the optional tow hitch accessory I saw in the brochure seem a bit optimistic. John Davis points out in the Motor Week review that the engine is one of the most easy-to-service transverse engines he's ever looked at. I love how that's something they actually used to take into account when reviewing a car. One thing that would be a little more annoying than it needs to be on the Alliance though, is replacing the radiator since somebody put the hood on backwards. I've never understood front hinged hoods. I know the Japanese used to do it too, but why? What could possibly be the advantage of this? This is one thing that the Americans got right first. Moving back to the accessories catalog, I think this 12-volt cigarette-operated air compressor is kinda cool. Sure, anyone can buy one of these off Amazon now, but it wasn't common that the average peasant owned one of these back in the day. My dad actually had this. He had an 86 Alliance convertible briefly when I was very young. I could just barely remember it, but I can remember this air compressor because he had it for a while after the Alliance was written off from an accident. Other accessories included cruise control, remote controlled mirrors, fog lights, different radio options, power steering was an accessory, and how about this? A 12-volt searchlight, or perhaps my favorite one, an illuminated cassette tape holder. Okay, I legitimately want that. The standard transmission was a 4 on the floor, but you could optionally get a 5-speed or a 3-speed automatic. Now we've got to look at the strange center stack in this thing. Here is where you can really see this car's French influence. You don't see this in American or Japanese cars. The radio is placed way down at the bottom, which is pretty poor design, but that's actually not the strange part. Look at these climate controls. They're placed vertically and the hot-cold slider moves up and down. To the left of that is a cigarette lighter and a hazard button and a few blanks. I'm assuming one of them is probably where the fog light switch goes, if so equipped. Above that is a digital clock, optional to L trims and standard to DL and limited models, but also this is where the power window switches and power door lock switch goes, which were option packages available to the DL and limited models. I mean, it's not that uncommon to see these switches in the center console, especially back then. That was actually a good cost savings measure because you didn't have to have like separate switches on each door. But I don't think I've ever seen them here before. By the way, here's something pretty high tech for 1983. You could actually get keyless entry for these. Renault called this their infrared locking system. This was not something you normally saw on cars in 1983, not even on much higher end luxury cars. They were a solid decade ahead of most of the competition on this one. Standard features the L trim adds to the base includes bright grille bars, which means it gets these little silver lines across them instead of it just being an all black grille, chrome trim on the body side moldings, around the bumper and around the lights. DL models offered an upgraded interior available in either cloth or vinyl, with seats that were mounted on strange rocker assemblies that actually kind of allowed you to rock the seats back and forth, access to more options, more insulation to reduce road noise, standard wheel trim rings, and wider steel belted radial tires. DL and above models also gave you a low fuel light and warning chimes for seatbelts, keying ignition, and headlights on. The most luxurious Alliance model is the Limited, which gives you a further upgraded interior with luxury door panels, a rear armrest, and seats that would later be reused in the Jeep Cherokee. Limited models also got these luxury wheel covers, chrome wheel lip moldings, a right side mirror, intermittent wipers, halogen headlights, and an illuminated passenger side vanity mirror. A few option packages that you could add was the protection group, which gets you door edge guards, color keyed floor mats, and a locking gas cap, a visibility group, which adds intermittent wipers, dual remote side view mirrors, and the passenger illuminated vanity mirror, and a light group, which gives you an engine compartment light, map lights, floor courtesy lights, an ashtray light, and a lighter ring. Believe it or not, the Alliance actually won Motor Trend's Car of the Year for 1983. That may seem surprising, but remember that it competed as a domestic model being built in Wisconsin with 72% American parts content, and most other domestic models in 1983 weren't exactly setting a high bar. Here's what it was up against. Up until 1999, Motor Trend's Import Car of the Year was a separate award. Motor Trend today seems a little embarrassed by this actually, and in 2022 wrote a whole article explaining why they made this choice. I'd rather they explain how they picked the awful Thunderbird reboot in 2002 or the PT Cruiser in 2001. Most disturbing to me personally though is that they've also picked several EV models as winners in recent years, and don't tell me that's to appease the masses. The Lucid Air starts at $77,000. That's not a car for the masses. Oh, but it will be soon. Don't you know battery prices are coming down? Soon they'll be. AMC Renault decided to capitalize on the year of the Alliance with a special edition called the Alliance MT. Alliance Motor Trend. And this model came in a special gray color, quite a boring gray color actually, but okay. Came with black alloy wheels, a black trunk-mounted luggage rack, and a commemorative plaque on the dash. They only made 3,000 two-door models and 6,000 four-door models. Not much changes on the Alliance for 1984, save for the addition of a very early 80s option. Remember the trend of electronic check systems in the early 80s? Basically a bunch of lights to monitor all sorts of different fluids. Mazda had it in the 626, Toyota's version was the electro sensor panel, and Nissan had the central sensor system. Well, Renault had one too. Available as an option to the Alliance on L and above trims, their version was called the System Sentry. These names, oh my gosh. It monitored virtually all of your fluids and even alerted you when your brake pads were getting low. Unlike most other manufacturers' systems though, it wasn't integrated into the gauge cluster, but rather its own pod to the left above the driver's climate vent. The real news for 1984 was the addition of a companion hatchback model called the Encore, available in 3 or 5-door versions. Despite having a different nameplate from the Alliance, the Encore isn't really much of a different model. It shares not only the same drivetrain and interior, but even the same front end. Okay, that's not completely true. There are some slight differences. The Encore grille has a much smaller Renault badge on it that's off-centered, and on the inside, the gauges have some silver trim around them, and the dash itself is two-toned with much more black. So they're about as different as the interior between a Civic and the new Prelude is. They were produced alongside the Alliance at the same plant in Wisconsin and were available in base, S, LS, and GS trims. The Encore can also be equipped with the high-tech laser key option, and look at how this little light comes on to let you know if it's locked or not.
Door indicators let you know if it's locked or not. An infinite number of laser calibration means each laser key is unique.
The Encore also came with a 60/40 split folding rear seat, something you think would be a given in a hatchback, but GM couldn't manage to give you that in an economy hatchback as late as 1989, so, you know. Special diamond editions were offered for both the Encore and Alliance in 1984 to celebrate the Encore's launch. These models were equivalent to LS trim Encores and DL trim Alliances, but added some additional equipment like a right side mirror, gold alloy wheels, gold colored striping, and a 6-speaker cassette stereo. The first couple years for the Alliance actually sold pretty well, and in the fourth quarter of 1983, AMC recorded a $7.4 million profit, the first time AMC had been profitable since 1979. However, between 1980 and 1983, AMC had lost well over $600 million, so they weren't exactly out of the woods. Oh hey losers, fancy running into you here. What are you talking about? You called me this morning and asked where I was going today. What do you think of my new car? It's called an Alliance. I mean, it kinda looks like a piece of junk, considering how it's puking fluid, but I guess if you like it, that's all that matters. It's not junk, I knew you'd say that. Well, I still like to buy American, unlike you traders. That doesn't look like an American car. Well, I bought it at American Motors, so... What does that say on the trunk lid? Renault? Renault? No, you uncultured fool, it's Renault. You don't pronounce the L or the T. Then why are they there? Well, I don't know. Maybe so the badge fills out the trunk lid. It's because it's a French name, you idiot. You've gone and bought one of them European cars. What? No way. While the Alliance was selling, all was not perfect with the Alliance. For one thing, they were terribly underpowered. But Renault tried to address this in 1985 by offering an optional 1.7-liter engine, which gave you a whopping 77 horsepower and 96 pound-feet of torque. You could get this engine on all but base trims, and it came standard in the Encore GS, which was sort of positioned as the sporty hatch model. Although the Encore and Alliance suspension was so soft that calling anything a sport model is a bit of a stretch. This 1.7-liter engine also came standard in the new convertible Alliance model that was introduced for 1985. A convertible economy car? That's right. The Alliance was the convertible for the common peasant, and AMC's first convertible since the 60s. These convertibles were also built in-house at AMC's Wisconsin plant and had a power-operated soft top. It pairs well with the power windows, but that was still an option. The convertible models were made from two-door coupes with their roof cut off and then structurally reinforced in a separate workshop before being reintegrated into the assembly line. Surprisingly, AMC did a good job reinforcing the convertible model. My dad's got rear-ended by an 80s Suburban at a decent speed, yet it was barely crumpled in at all and he walked away with just a bit of whiplash. Yes, it was written off, but by that time it was a 9-year-old French-designed car manufactured by an automaker no longer in business. I don't know how extensive the damage really was, but on paper it probably wasn't worth fixing at just about any cost. There was also another special model for 1985, one for the two-door Alliance and one for the Encore, known as the Alliance or Encore Spring. The Alliance Spring came in special two-toned almond color with matching wheel covers. Oh gosh. And the Encore one was a little less nauseating with either a red and black or a blue and black two-tone color scheme and black wheel covers. 1986 brings a bit of a cosmetic refresh both to Alliances and Encores with a new grille, smaller headlights, both of which are trimmed in thicker chrome with a lower hood line. While previous models had just black plastic trimming the outer edges of the headlights, 86 models have some sort of white lens. I'm not sure if that's actually a clear reflector or not. I was so young when my dad had his, I don't really remember, and there's not a lot of 86 model pictures out there. And as you'll see shortly, they go away again in 1987, so this was a one-year only thing. On the back, the DL trim has extended taillights that now go onto the trunk lid, but I'm pretty sure the taillights remain unchanged in all the other trims. I don't remember what trim my dad's had, but it had the white reflectors, but not the extended taillights, so I guess it was an L. The Alliance Limited model has been discontinued, and a third brake light has been added to the trunk lid of the convertible since that's now mandated. Inside, there's a new dash with a shelf and a mostly better layout. The climate controls now slide horizontally, but the radio is still way down at the bottom, which makes no sense considering there's all this pointless, wasted, empty space above it between it and the climate controls. I mean, what is going on here? Did someone try to play Tetris and fail miserably? Is there some sort of optional stuff that's supposed to go here? Oh right, the power window switches and door locks, those go here. Ugh, these really should just go on the doors. What are we doing, Renault? And they can't put them on the center console, which is the usual cost-saving route, because that's a dealer-installed accessory. Give it a damn center console, come on, it's 1986.
Heat ducts are strategically placed at the base of the console for rear seat passenger comfort.
Actually, you know what they should have done? The radio should have gone up here, and it can trade places with the clock and this storage pocket, and I think that would have been much better. Believe it or not, though, Renault actually considered their radio placement fixed with the 86 update.
The radio has been moved up on the console for easier access.
The new gauge cluster features a voltmeter instead of an oil level gauge, unless you get a base model, in which case you will just get a speedo, a fuel gauge, and a bunch of unused real estate. The Encore gets a new model called the Encore Electronic. Its primary feature is a digital gauge cluster that looks straight out of an 80s arcade game. Unfortunately for AMC and Renault, despite early promising signs with the Alliance in 83 and 84, and the great success of the new Jeep Cherokee, things were not looking so good for them by 1985. Fuel prices had started to come down again, and all of a sudden, Americans were wanting larger vehicles again. Not land yachts necessarily, but, you know, something bigger than a subcompact. While this was good for their Jeep division, by this point, all of AMC's passenger cars, save for the Eagle, were Renault models, all of which were now too small for most people who wanted sedans, and the Encore just wasn't selling very well in the hatch market. There was too much better hatchback competition at the time, I think, and this hatch was a little weird looking for an American market car. The rear of it definitely looked European. Compounding the problem was some considerable product quality issues with the Renault models that were starting to crop up, and the French didn't seem too interested in fixing them. There were transmission fluid leaks that Renault didn't admit existed, frequent cold starting issues, especially in colder climates like northern United States and Canada, and I read a lot of comments from people who had overheating issues, and it doesn't even seem to be that uncommon for these things to just burn to the ground. By 1986, sales of the Alliance were barely half of what they were in 1983, and the Encore was selling even worse. US plants were no longer operating anywhere near capacity, and Renault chairman George A. Bess was being pressured by executives and the French government to divest from AMC, as year after year, money was being sent across the Atlantic to AMC into what they saw as a bottomless pit and never coming back. But what could they do other than declare AMC bankrupt and lose all of the money they had already invested? I mean, who would want to purchase all of those shares in a company that posted a $91.3 million loss in 1986? For 1987, Alliance models received another front-end facelift that gave it another new grille, changed this back to black, and reduced the number of headlights. In place of the deleted inner headlamps, the turn signals were moved up off of the bumper. They also renamed the Encore as the Alliance hatchback. I suggest Honda give a similar name change to this thing. How dare you! Base Alliance models now had black bumpers, and most models now had black door handles and much less chrome trim. I'm gonna assume there was some cost cutting involved. In a desperate attempt to try and create some more interest in an otherwise uninteresting model that was becoming rather dated by this point, there was a new, sporty model, the Alliance GTA. GTAs came in either coupes or convertibles with all body-colored trim, GTA badging, a little bit of a body kit, and some new 15-inch wheels. Inside, GTAs get a 3-spoke steering wheel, sportier bucket seats, and some red accent stripes. It gets a sport-tuned suspension, the 5-speed manual, and under that front hinged hood is a larger 2-liter engine rated at 95 horsepower and 114 pound-feet of torque. The Alliance was a very light car, and the GTA coupe weighed just over 2,100 pounds. It still couldn't quite get a single-digit 0 to 60 time, but you know, it was better. MotorWeek did praise the GTA for having significantly better handling though over previous Alliance models, which had been very soft and prone to body roll. However, this didn't save them. 1987 would be the last model year for Alliance and the last model year for Renault in North America. On May 20th, 1987, Chrysler purchased all of Renault's shares in AMC, plus all remaining shares. Of course, what Chrysler really wanted was the Jeep brand, especially the XJ and the unreleased ZJ model, which was still early in its development phase. The Renault Alliance only sold just over 13,000 models in the first 5 months of 1987, and dealership levels were increasing with little public interest. Can someone move these damn Alliances so we have more room for Jeeps? The last Alliance rolled off the production line on June 5th, 1987, despite 1988 press kits having already been created, and some media outlets reporting that Chrysler would continue to offer the Alliance subcompact in 1988, but Chrysler didn't need another lackluster subcompact. They already had enough. Now, it's worth mentioning that the Chrysler buyout didn't just come out of the blue in 1987. Renault AMC had made a deal with Chrysler in 1986 to use the extra capacity at their AMC plants, capacity generously provided by Renault models that weren't selling, to build cars for Chrysler, mainly their full-size sedans, rather fitting since AMC didn't have any full-size sedans of their own they could make. This of course started rumors that Chrysler was getting to buy out AMC, and that wasn't really too far from the truth, but really all Lee Iacocca wanted was Jeep. And I don't blame him, that was the only good product AMC was making at this point, but it was a good one. Renault, of course, wasn't dumb enough to sell just Jeep. They wanted Chrysler to buy out AMC in full. And there's a lot more to the story than just that. It's actually quite an interesting story, which even involves the assassination of French Renault chairman George A. Bessy, who was resisting the sale, appearing to believe AMC could still be turned around and made profitable again. But I want to do a video on the Jeep Cherokee and Grand Cherokee, and I think it would make more sense to cover the buyout in greater detail in that video, since Jeep is the whole reason Chrysler wanted AMC, rather than waste time talking about it in an obscure Renault Alliance video that barely anyone will probably watch. Does anyone even remember this car? We remember it, we just don't care.